The Dallas Cowboys held OTA practice on Thursday, and we got some big takeaways. What do you need to know from camp? What happened? What were the latest developments? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners will get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, how you doing today, sir?
Well, I mean, I'm glad to be back. It's been quite a week. For those who don't know, we've been dealing with a little COVID scare in the house. It timed out just well because Marcus and I were kind of cutting back the weekly podcast. So I'm refreshed and ready to talk about football. And certainly glad that we got some OTA notes to kind of go over to kind of take our mind off of everything else.
Yeah, it seems like it was a intense practice from the Cowboys on Thursday. A couple of players got into some fights. Mike McCarthy blamed it on the heat. We saw a rookie get tossed from camp. But I actually want to start with some wide receiver stuff. So, first and foremost, Jalen Tolbert was back at practice, and it sounds like he had a good day. He missed the last couple of OTA practices that were available to the media due to hamstring tightness, but he was back and performed well. Any thoughts there?
I obviously that's great. I mean, it was good that I think that he had his touchdown in 2 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, on a slant, which is fantastic to just kind of see him getting in the mix there in the 2 minutes. All of this right now is just part of their install process. So it's important for him to be out there and kind of getting the reps and getting the physical, getting his body used to kind of moving in those ways. But I also think that a lot of what's been going on the last 2 weeks has really just been about learning the playbook, learning the practice methodology. So was it important for him to be on the field during this? I think it is. Is it going to be life-ending that he hasn't made it on the field until now? I don't think it will be. I think mini camp was really important for these young wide receivers to kind of all be in, and I'm glad that he made it back in time to kind of be part of the mini camp.
We should also mention CeeDee Lamb didn't practice. We haven't really found out why. I don't know if it was like a rest day, whether it was some kind of hamstring tightness, but you don't get the sense that it's anything super serious. We'll see. Michael Gallup continues to work back from his injury. Saw him working on the cords again. We talked about the importance of that last week, but I mean, again, it seems like Michael Gallup is... he's doing well. I don't want to say that he's on pace to be ready for the season, but it doesn't appear that this is going to be something that drags well into the season.
Yeah, I mean, again, like the fact that he's on the cords already and we're not even in training camp yet, like that does bode well that he's hopefully not going to miss a ton of time. I mean, I don't, dare try to put like a timeline on this. But I do think that this conversation, we can kind of, parlay this into a little bit of some of the Jabril Cox news we got as well from friend of the show, Mike Fisher, who apparently talked to Jabril directly. And I guess Jabril didn't get the note from the medical staff or from Mike McCarthy to not discuss timelines because McCarthy's been kind of denying or not wanting to discuss timelines, obviously, because I'm sure the medical staff is telling him not to. Jabril Cox basically told Mike Fisher that he's going to be back for training camp. That training camp is when he's going to be back on the field, which is incredible. I mean, that's great that he's going to get a full training camp. If that's true, like that really kind of makes you feel a lot better about the linebacker position for sure.
Yes.
I would say that the reason I think that conversation kind of is led in to the Jabril Cox, the Gallup conversation is led into the Jabril Cox. I'm starting to wonder, and I'd love for someone to confirm this, but I don't think that anyone will. I would like to know if those guys are they use the new kind of bare ACL technique that we're hearing that is kind of all the rage now. They use like a they it's like a tendon replacement, but then they inject. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but they inject your own blood cells back into the healing area, and it helps kind of help with swelling and helps kind of speed up the whole process. And so and the reason I'm pointing this out is because I just wonder if they're, if they did get that surgery and if that is accelerating their timeline a little bit more than we're used to, because it does seem like both guys are well in front of what we expected them to be at this point, recovering from ACL injuries.
Yeah, we'll see. We talked about Jabril Cox. I believe it was on the last show that we did about his importance to this team. Like, he's believe it or not, he's one of the more important Cowboys players on defense this year because they just don't have a lot of linebacker depth. So they need him to be healthy, and they need him to play well. They can't really afford to have some big learning curve here. They can't really afford to have him, take the first couple of months of the season to get up to speed. They need him to play well and play early in the season. So if he is healthy, if he can be back full bore for our training camp and be ready to go, that's fantastic news for the Cowboys. I do want to talk about a receiver that had a really big day, according to multiple beat reporters there. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about Blue Nile. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile will then handcraft a perfect engagement ring, with each ring being one of a kind. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Cowboys listeners will get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use promo code Locked On. That is promo code Locked On. Go visit BlueNile.com today. All right. According to Kyle Yeomans of DallasCowboys.com, TJ Vasher, a receiver out of Texas Tech that we really haven't spent any time talking about, continues to have some pretty good practices. Now, we know, again, that CeeDee Lamb was out. Jalen Tolbert was just starting to work back. James Washington's been dealing with a foot injury. Michael Gallup's not there. The Cowboys have a lot of guys just out. So it's a big opportunity for Vasher. But we mention all the time, this is a drumbeat thing, right? If we're hearing multiple practices that TJ Vasher looks good, maybe we should start putting some stock into it.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, the drumbeat for Vasher started before training, before OTAs. We were hearing stuff from people inside the buildings that they're excited about Vasher. They're excited about what he's going to come into this year after a year in the off season in kind of training. And so I think the thing about Vasher is that, unlike a lot of these other guys, he kind of brings a unique skill set. I mean, we did talk about this part of it, is that he is uniquely sized, for the Cowboys, and you kind of actually
data right here.
Give me the historical data there.
So the Cowboys have not drafted a receiver taller than 6'3", 6'030 since Macy Brooks in the 1997 NFL draft. The last receiver that they've had 6'4" taller to catch a pass, do you know who it is? Simi Fehoko is 6'3", by the way. I saw people send this to me. Do you know who it is?
No, I don't.
Keyshawn Johnson.
Keyshawn Johnson's taller than 6'3"?
He was like 6'5", 230. He was huge. Yeah,
I guess it was. I knew he was big, but 6'5", like, that still seems so massive for a wide receiver, right? And Keyshawn didn't seem like Plaxico sized, but God, I guess you're right, he was.
They just haven't had very many big receivers over the last 2 decades. And TJ Vasher, he counts as a big receiver when you're 6'5" and you've got an 86-inch wingspan or something crazy like that.
It's the biggest wingspan in combine history for a wide receiver, if I'm not mistaken.
Longest arms, 35 and 5/8 inches, 84.5-inch wingspan, 6'5"
tackle numbers. That's crazy.
Yes. 6'5.5", 203 pounds, and we've been hearing reports that he put on like 13 to 15 pounds of weight since last year.
So, I mean, again, what do you have in this guy, right? You have a big guy who has a huge catch radius, and you watch his tape in college. He routinely made acrobatic catch after acrobatic catch. I think if anything, It's the route refinement. It's the kind of separation issue. It's the same issues you see with a lot of these bigger guys. They're just not the same sort of foot athlete that the guys who are, a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller are than they are. But that doesn't mean that they can't win in certain ways. And it certainly doesn't mean that he can't be valuable to this team, because if he could find a way to, continue to take this momentum of OTAs into minicamp and into training camp and then show you something, he could be a pretty valuable down roster guy, maybe as a red zone threat, as a guy who he plays with, even though we have other guys who are like kind of similar skilled, I guess, or like do kind of contested catch ball stuff. Nothing like this guy. I mean, this guy is just like throw it up and go get it, up
and
top.
Here's what's interesting, right? If the Cowboys are going to play CeeDee Lamb a lot on the outside, and we know Michael Gallup, when he's back, is going to take back his regular role, I think the idea is that they're going to have like a slot by committee, right? Like sometimes it'll be Jalen Tolbert. I think sometimes it's going to be Tony Pollard, right? If you want a 2nd down and 8 and you want somebody that can, either run the jet sweep stuff or can run, simple underneath routes, I think Tony Pollard can do that. But if you want somebody that can stretch the seam, that's where TJ Vasher could really be interesting. Basically using him like Marcus Wilson.
Yeah.
I think that's where the Cowboys could get some value from him. But we'll see if he even makes the team. He's got a long fight to even make the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be tough. It certainly is not like a guaranteed thing. And I mean, I think the reason that we point him out outside of like, some of the other guys like Brandon Smith or whomever down roster wide receiver is that he does have kind of a unique skill set. He does have sort of a thing that can be valuable if you could find a way to get him on a game day roster. But I mean, I don't know what he is as a special teamer. I don't know what he gives you anything outside of a down roster wide receiver. And keeping guys like that can be dangerous because you're wasting valuable roster spots for guys that you need to play with special teams. There are downsides to keeping a wide receiver 5 that isn't going to make a tackle or isn't, what I'm saying? So, I think at this point it's a long shot. He's got a ways to go, but if he shows you something, if he shows you some ability, if that drumbeat continues into training camp, I do think that more so than like, let's say Brandon Smith or some of these other guys, he has a unique opportunity to make the team if he shows you something, because he does bring something to the roster on offense that you don't really have anywhere else.
All right, a couple other things that we need to get through. Dalton Schultz, obviously not at OTAs. Mike McCarthy says he has been communicating with them. We'll see about minicamp here in the next week, but we talked about this on Monday and Tuesday. We're just not overly concerned, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point it's just precautionary. They're just making sure everything's they just don't want to put any of these guys out that are dealing with any kind of injury at all or anything at all. I think the other thing we have to kind of keep in mind too that has kind of changed over the last few years that is having an effect here, but not as pronounced or as obvious, is that they are getting GPS numbers. And so they are using these GPS numbers in conjunction with formulas that they have to kind of determine workload. So they are pulling guys, when they've got high GPS numbers, meaning like they've run a lot or they ran more than they should have, or, and again, it's not, I don't even think it's as simplified as that or as dumbed down as that. I think they actually have actual, what do you call it? Formulas and different models that they use with the GPS technology to try to help people prevent, kind of soft tissue issues. So, I think a lot of these times they're looking at the numbers and deciding to pull these guys and, just not giving, like CD, it's like, maybe they ran him a lot in practice because of all the extra, injuries that were on wide receiver. Right. And so they're like, he ran X amount of yards in the last week. We can't really run him anymore this week. So they just pulled him back and let the other guys go in. So I guess it's a long way of me saying, I don't know that we always need to read into the stuff as injury necessarily. Yes. I think that some of it is monitoring use and being very careful with overworking these guys before we even get into minicamp.
All right, we got one more storyline we need to talk about before we head out. But before we do that, we want to tell you guys about Built Bar. Don't you love a chewy, chocolatey brownie? What about a caramel brownie with caramel swirled on top? So good. Now, what if I told you that you could have this brownie with 17 grams of protein and it's only 130 calories? Yes, you guys know by now. It's Built Bar. They've got caramel brownie bars that are covered in 100% real chocolate. Go to the website right now because they're not going to last very long. Partly because I ordered like 3 boxes. Go use promo code LOCK15 at 15% and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right.
It's ironic that you're like Built Bar's biggest customer and you're also advertising for them. Which
Yes,
is
I literally have a Built Bar every day. They're fantastic.
I have literally one within reach at this point.
There you go.
It's like, boom. All I have to do
There
is
you
just
go.
have one
Oh, nice.
within reach.
All right. John Ridgeway versus Josh Ball. That's the story of this one. So we got a little bit of fighting. Mike McCarthy blamed it on the heat, which you just go practice inside, Mike. It's not that big of a deal. It's not old school football. You need to show how tough you are. But Ridgeway got kicked out of practice after an altercation with Josh Ball, which is kind of funny. I'm just going to throw it to you. This is like bad TV/radio. Thoughts, Landon?
Wow. Thanks, Stephen A. So I think that, here's the thing. It's a couple of things. One, I heard let them practice inside. They don't want to practice inside. They want to practice outside so they have better turf situations, I'm assuming. And I think they want these guys. I also think they want these guys fighting. Let's go there. Let's go there, right? You don't draft John Ridgeway if you're not interested in having a fight on your practice
or Josh Ball.
Here's the thing. I tend to think that this is a good thing. I tend to think the fact that they have a dude who's willing to mix it up. That's what they need. They needed that. They needed guys who were willing to fight. They needed guys who were tough guys that were willing to scrap. I mean, I'm kind of sick of them not having those guys. You know, like they needed an enforcer, someone to give this team a little bit of attitude. And again, I think if you had a guy like that, who had any kind of authority or any kind of leadership role on the team when you played San Francisco, maybe you don't get your butt kicked up and down the field all throughout the first quarter in the run game. So I tend to think that it's a good thing that this happened. That it shows
they
the level
need
of
this.
scrappiness. They need this. Jimmy Johnson used to do this all the time. I can't remember. I mean, I remember hearing stories about them. Jimmy pulling some guys, probably leaders too, like Aikman and Irvin and all those guys, like pulling them aside and saying, "Hey, we need to mix it up. We need to get fights going." Because they used to have fights all the time in training camps, practices, and mini camp practices and OTA practices. So I think this is, these guys are physical, aggressive people, and if you don't have those folks on your team, you're probably going to have a problem. So,
and let's be honest about Ball and Ridgeway. These are two guys that are fighting to make the roster, right? Both these guys are not locks to make this team, despite people being really excited about it. They're day 3 picks. They need to show that they're the alpha, right? And that, hey, they're not going to take any crap from anybody. And hey, when we're going to protect our teammates, like, I get it.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I think some people may think that, by being sent off the practice field, that kind of decreased Ridgeway's chance of making the team. I think it increases it.
Yes, it might help.
I think it helps. Right? So, I think it's. I know there's going to be a contingent that says that guys shouldn't be fighting, shouldn't be wasting practice time doing that sort of thing. That may be the best thing that happened in practice all day, just to show these guys, hey, like, this is serious. This means something to me. And so I think that shows a level of attitude that
100%
needed to be injected onto this team.
I think that's why you draft somebody like John Ridgeway, who's not a great athlete, who's not a great pass rusher, right? You need somebody that's a mean SOB and then the middle of your defense, right?
An extra in Roadhouse, like a guy that's like a 6'5", 350-pound bouncer who in any other venue would be wearing like a biker vest, and checking IDs at a honky tonk. That's who you need. Some guy who will literally or figuratively throw a guy out of the club when you need him to.
When you said bouncer, I kept thinking about Bud from Kill Bill 2. My guy Quentin Tarantino. That's not really what we're looking for, but that's what bouncer comes to my mind. There you go. That's a Martin Scorsese and a Quentin Tarantino mention in this week's podcast.
That's we call that the Marcus 1-2. It's what we call that in the industry.
So next week we have a lot of fun shows lined up for you. I believe the Cowboys start minicamp next week, which we'll get more news from minicamps. We'll actually have beat reporters that are there watching practice. Hopefully, should be a lot of news coming out from those practices. We'll see if Dalton Schultz shows up. We'll see if James Washington can participate. I'm sure we'll hear more about Tyler Smith and Sam Williams and Jalen Tolbert, the Cowboys rookies. So make sure you guys are downloading the Locked On Cowboys podcast wherever you get your Locked On podcasts, including the Locked On NFL podcast, which has national NFL experts and insiders keeping fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news. Follow Locked On NFL every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Again, all the same places. You get the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Follow the show at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I am at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you guys next time.